Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed and tonight we're going to focus on the statements of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that took place on Friday during his inspection visit to the military academy and his meeting with several students, hundreds of students on the day, performing the Fajr prayers with them and having breakfast as well. And the statements, they centered on the situation not just for Egypt domestically on the economic and the political fronts, but on the region in general, more specifically on the Gaza Strip. The efforts of Egypt to be alleviating the pressure over the shoulders of the Palestinians on different fronts. One of them is to be reaching a ceasefire, and the efforts of Egypt over the past 2 years to be reaching a ceasefire between the Israeli occupation forces, the Israeli government, and the Palestinian fighters of Hamas, the resistance fighters of Hamas, and the efforts of Egypt to be reaching, or the entry of the distribution of aid from Egypt into Gaza. And we'll be shedding more light on the statements of Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdul Ati at the United Nations General Assembly 80th session that took place in New York over the past couple of days, also centering on the situation in Gaza and the efforts of Egypt diplomatically and on the humanitarian level to be helping the Palestinians in general and more specifically in the Gaza Strip. And we return to the statements of President al-Sisi stating that there is coordination and cooperation between Egypt and the United States and the American President Donald Trump over a 21-point plan to be helping the Palestinians to be reaching an immediate ceasefire and looking to the days ahead, the reconstruction and the recovery of the Gaza Strip. All this and more during the course of the episode for the Daily Debate for tonight. However, we will be starting with the main top stories that took place for today, as President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi asserted the need for the continuous work to secure the hard currency needs for the procurement of the production inputs and to enhance the strategic stocks of different commodities. The remarks were made as the President received the Governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, Hassan Abdullah. Presidential spokesman Mohammed al-Shinawi said that during the meeting, al-Sisi was briefed on the latest developments related to the financial indicators improvements, including the inflation rate decreases and better foreign currency exchange rates. President al-Sisi said that the state and the Central Bank of Egypt governor are coordinating to keep the inflation rate lower and ensure the foreign currency rates flexible and unified. Domestically, but on another front, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stressed the importance of a close and accurate follow-up of the upcoming inauguration of the Grand Egyptian Museum on November the 1st. Meeting with Prime Minister Mustafa Madhouli and the Tourism Minister Sharif Fathi, the President directed that all the details should be attended to in order to make the event a remarkable world-class cultural success. The President said that the renovations of the entire area surrounding the gem should continue to ensure the optimal landscape view. President al-Sisi asserted that the private sector should play a role in the tourism investment to increase the tourist arrivals, improve the infrastructure of sites, enhance the variety of tourist destinations, and put a marketing plan for opening new markets and increasing revenues in the tourism sector. The head of state added that the sustainable development principles should be observed in managing the ancient sites that are listed on the UNESCO World Heritage in cooperation with the international organization. And still with the presidential activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as he received the head of the African Bank for Exports and Imports, African Bank, Dr. Benedict Orama, whose mandate ends next month, and the upcoming president of the bank, Dr. George Ilombi, in Cairo. The meeting was attended by Governor of Egypt's Central Bank, Hassan Abdullah. Presidential spokesman Mohammed al-Shinawi said that during the meeting, Sisi hailed the efforts by Orama in boosting and diversifying the intra-African trade, as well as increasing the African share in the international trade. He said during the meeting, Orama reviewed the most significant achievements during the 10-year tenure, atop of which the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area. For his part, Ilombi reviewed the vision and plans to develop the bank and boost its role in Africa. And finally, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Migration, Dr. Badra Abdulati, stressed the need to continue intensifying the efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip and ensure the unhindered access for aid. This came during Abdulati's meeting with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, on the sidelines of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. Abdulati reiterated the Egyptian full support for the role of the United Nations in maintaining the international peace and security and addressing the growing global challenges. For his part, Guterres praised the Egyptian role as a key player in the multilateral system, as well as its firm commitment to the principles and the purposes of the United Nations Charter, the tireless efforts to promote the international peace and security, support development issues, and respect the international law. During the meeting, the foreign minister reviewed a number of issues, most notably the Egyptian steadfast position in support of the security, stability, and the unity of Sudan, the need to continue efforts to advance the political process in Libya, and the Egyptian diplomatic efforts that contributed to reaching an agreement between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency. And to be shedding more light on this meeting between Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati and the United Nations General Assembly, Antonio Guterres, I'm honored to be having with me over the phone on the daily debate for tonight, Dr. Ahmed Sharaf, the educational consultant. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on Nile TV International.
Well, thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is all mine. Of course, we did see the meeting between Foreign Minister Abdulati and the Secretary General of the United Nations. How did you see the importance of this meeting and the overall participation of Dr. Badr Abdulati at the United Nations General Assembly 80th session meetings?
Well, you know, Ahmed, the question that I would like to raise at the beginning of my phone call today, it's why Egypt's UN role matters now. And I quote what you said at the beginning, that there is very, very important coordination between Egypt and the US and all other international stakeholders. These days, the stakes are extraordinarily high. The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza renew the global attention, shifting alliances and urgent debates over construction and political settlement. From this perspective and in this context, we can just see that Egypt's foreign minister's active role at the UN is more than symbolic. It's a linchpin in shaping what the international response looks like. So Egypt's political engagement at the UN at this particular moment is very, very critical, Ahmed. Well, first of all, as you can see, that the war in Gaza was massive civilian suffering, has pushed the Israeli-Palestinian issue to the top of the UN agenda during the 80th General Assembly. So what's happening here today is we can just see that there is another diplomatic battleground, and Egypt is just saying or proposing in the UN settings, carrying potential rebel effects in negotiations. So, in my humble opinion, I think that Egypt is reinforcing again its soft power and its diplomatic power as well. and Egypt is just continuing with its active role to maintain and having a very, very important position when it comes to resolving the disastrous situation today happening in Gaza. You can just see that the efforts are active and substantive, and there are some concrete actions Egypt is undertaking in the UN in this period. So one important point that we need to consider here is just that Egypt's foreign minister met with the UN Secretary General Guterres, reaffirming full support for the UN agencies, including the protection also for the UNRWA in Gaza. In Security Council debates, Egypt's representative criticized the ongoing military operations that target Gaza City, calling them devoid of legal or moral basis and warning of regional escalation. So Egypt is also hosting a Gaza recovery meeting at the UN, aligning participants around the Arab Islamic Plan for construction and exploring collaboration across UN, Arab, and international partners. And Egypt publicly, by the way, expressed its readiness to build on the 21-point U.S. vision from President Trump for ending the Gaza war, conditional on safeguarding Palestinian interests and preventing displacement. Ahmed.
Yes, Doctor, we have seen the statements of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Friday, and then the echoing of the same statements by Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati on two fronts: the diplomatic solution through the efforts of Egypt to be reaching a ceasefire between the Israeli government or the Israeli occupation forces and the resistance fighters of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, to be reaching an immediate ceasefire, and the entry of the humanitarian aid from the Egyptian side through the Rafah border crossing to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. How would you see the overall efforts of Egypt, not just for the past couple of weeks, but for the past 2 years, according to the statements of President al-Sisi, to be reaching a solution for both problems?
Well, you know, Ahmed, Egypt has long served as a key mediator between Israel, Hamas, and other Palestinian factions. In such current conflict, Egypt's diplomacy has focused on brokering cessation of hostilities, proposing no ceasefire plans. So Egypt put forward a new proposal to restore Gaza ceasefire, which included a mechanism of weekly hostage releases. The proposal also suggested that Israel commit to a schedule for full withdrawal from Gaza, and Egypt is also ready to host negotiations and facilitating dialogues, backing and supporting the terms of truce acceptance and pushing for implementation. So I think that Egyptian diplomacy today is very important for ceasefire negotiation. Well, number one, we need to consider the strategic geographic position. So Egypt shares the border with Gaza. We need to remember that via the Rafah crossing, making it crucial for humanitarian access and movement of goods or people. Its control over boundary protocols gives it leverage in ceasefire arrangements. The second point, Egypt as a mediator has a legitimacy and a trust. So Egypt is viewed by many parties as a relatively neutral actor with diplomatic standing and the capacity to convene talks. And because it maintains the relations with Israel, the U.S., the Arab states, and the Palestinian actors, it can bridge gaps in trust. Egypt can also work on balancing the humanitarian and security interests, shaping post-ceasefire order and recovery, practicing more pressures on international diplomacy areas. And of course, there are a lot when it comes to the challenges, but at the end, what we hope is Egyptian diplomacy can work out to find a solution for what's happening in Gaza nowadays. Ahmed.
Yes, Dr. Ahmed Sharaf, the political analyst and the educational consultant, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate and Nile TV International. We will be heading to the first report of the daily debate for tonight, focusing on the efforts of the U.S. President through the 21-point plan to be stopping the aggression by the Israelis against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and to be having more entrances for the distribution of aid from the Egyptian side to the Palestinian side through the Rafah border crossing for the benefit of the Palestinians, something that was pinpointed and highlighted through the statements of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Friday, that we needed and we hoped for more cooperation, and that we are optimistic through this cooperation between Egypt, the United States and the other mediators to be looking to the days ahead, the immediate ceasefire of the aggression against the Palestinians and the reconstruction and the recovery for the Palestinians in the near future. We'll be having more details in the upcoming report. Stay tuned.
The Palestinian group Hamas said on Saturday that it has not yet received U.S. President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan as Israeli forces expanded their assault on Gaza City. The comments came after sources said Hamas had agreed in principle to release all Israeli hostages it holds in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and a gradual withdrawal of Israeli troops under Trump's plan. The Trump administration has proposed a 21-point Gaza peace plan that calls for all hostages held by Hamas to be released within 48 hours of an agreement, and sets out a roadmap for Gaza. Once the war ends, U.S. President Donald Trump has voiced optimism about resolving the conflict, saying they are very close to a deal just days after his envoy said a breakthrough was possible. The plan could be problematic for Netanyahu, given it recognizes aspirations for a Palestinian state, something firmly opposed by key members of his government. The release of hostages would be in exchange for a phased withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. The plan would deny Hamas any future role in the governance of Gaza. Instead, it calls for 2 levels of interim governance, and overarching international body and the Palestinian Committee. There is no timeline in the proposal for the international body to pass leadership of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority, which exercises nominal self-rule in parts of the occupied West Bank and faces heavy restrictions by Israel. The plan does not indicate that the U.S. would support creation of a Palestinian state, but recognizes it as an aspiration of the Palestinians. The Trump administration has been highly critical of moves by other governments, including the UK, France and Canada, to recognize a Palestinian state. Secretary of State Marco Rubio described it as reckless. However, the U.S. plan could offer a pathway to some form of Palestinian self-rule. The U.S. blueprint also says there cannot be any forced displacement of Gaza's population. Washington's roadmap aligns surprisingly closely with the UN-backed plan, but key differences could prove unworkable. French President Emmanuel Macron says it is also compatible with the plan for Palestine set out in New York declaration endorsed by the UN General Assembly this week. Arab and Islamic leaders who met U.S. President Donald Trump at a multilateral summit in New York on Tuesday issued a joint statement rejecting any forced displacement of Palestinians and calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza to ease the worsening humanitarian crisis.